All right, it's 3 o'clock. I call the Winnebago County Human Services Board to order. First order of business, public comment. Anybody have any public comments? Nobody's online?
Nobody's online today.
All right, thanks. Nobody. Well, new board member in your introduction.
Unfortunately, we do have a new board member, Mark Weisensell, who is not new to us because he used to be here. I think he retired about 4 years ago. Mark was in this area and working. He used to be the aging director for the county, and I'm guessing that Mark either got a little confused about the time. I think he might still end up coming, so maybe we let him introduce himself.
Yeah, when he comes, yeah.
But he is actually replacing Donna Lori and her seat as assistant board member. And I think he's appointed through the end of 25, if I remember right.
Good. Could be. All right.
He's good.
So then, no program today because our officer couldn't make it.
Yeah, so Mike Sewell is sick today.
Bill, get a little brief on it.
And I'm not going to talk about community safety events because I don't know what they are. But I thought I'd just give you a quick update on the biennial budget. Just so you know, we, as counties, had a number of significant asks this biennial budget. Almost none of them actually happened. We asked for a pretty significant increase in Medicaid money for outpatient crisis services. That got nowhere. That didn't end up in the budget. Also, what is in the governor's budget was an increase to our community support program for chronically mentally ill adults. And that was supported by the governor, was supported by NAMI, and also didn't end up in the budget. So that went down, and we had requested some money from actually through Representative Schraw's office for we've been paying a maintenance of effort in our children's long-term support services for many years now. It's about $800,000 of levy for us, and it's kind of an unfair proportion that we're paying versus other counties. And so we asked for that to be removed and replaced with general purpose revenue. That didn't happen. So those were our three big asks that didn't materialize. We did get some extra money in actually in Beth's area, long-term support in the area of ADRC. There's some additional funding, and the state hasn't quite figured out how they're going to divvy it up, but it was about a couple million, I think. Was it a couple million statewide?
About 5 million.
Here's Mark. Hello. Mark, do we even have a big card?
There's a card from up there. I got it right here. Yep.
Sorry about that. My youngest son's car died.
That's okay. We thought maybe just to remember the place where the place was.
So if you want to back up and
Yeah, we can, yeah.
So Mark, I did a little bit of introduction about, who you are for those people who don't remember you. You were about 4 years ago retired, right?
Right.
From us, and was the director of aging for a number of years, then combined with human services, and then finished out in remind me of the
EDRC working with Beth.
Yep, ADRC working with Beth.
You were still the aging director then.
So anyway, so I mentioned that you showed interest and talked with John, and John appointed you and you were confirmed by the county board at last month's meeting. Do you want to, I know you don't know everybody. Do you want us to go around and kind of introduce ourselves, maybe?
Sure, I know some of you. But yeah.
Well, why don't you start with Tammy? Why don't you start and we'll go around?
Tammy Steyer, I'm
Yes.
Deputy Division Manager for Behavioral Health.
Hi, I'm Heather Faust. I'm the behavioral health family.
I have it.
Hello, Mark. I'm a new
I
baby.
know you. Hey, Harold.
Harold Zingstock, City of Oshkosh, citizen.
Ralph.
Jeff Beam, 34.
Yes. Ralph Harrison, District 31. Ralph. My pleasure.
I say there.
Hi, Mark. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello.
It's an honor. Victor. And Larry.
Heather.
Erica, 25, hi, Mark.
My
my county board member.
Yeah, there you go.
And Rachel Young was District 29. Oh, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Welcome back, Mark.
Okay. Thank you all.
Good, glad to have
This
you
is
back.
great to have you
I'm
back.
excited about this.
Yeah.
So Mark, tell us, why you wanted to be on and what your hope is and.
Well, when I retired, as you know, Bill, I said I wanted to go about 4 years to decide what I wanted to volunteer in and things like that, because you do, when you do retire, you do get a lot of offers out there. And you don't want to jump at the first thing. You want to do something that's important to you. And this is important to me, human services. And in the state of Wisconsin, a day after this, the area agencies on aging, or GWAR, asked me to be on their advisory board too. So I'm on their board too, but there's no conflict of interest. But I just, yeah, my wife and both boys have gotten settled. They have girlfriends, you know, nothing serious yet, but they both have girlfriends, and they're on their own. So I wanted to volunteer and give something back to Winnebago County. That's been good to me. So I'm honored.
That's good. The one thing I remember about Mark is when he was ADRC is, at that time, we had some issues with the Oshkosh Transit and the bus and whatever. So we used to take some bus trips.
We did,
We
Larry.
rode the bus all over town in different places, and just to see how, you know, what it was like to ride the bus, and you have to inconvenience any spots or whatever. Did some shopping, didn't we, Mark?
We did, and we shook up people a little bit and just said that,
Talk to people on the bus, yeah.
and we told them the county can't afford to fund all kinds of buses when the city can get money for it.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
I followed that Route 10 thing and everything. I follow the politics pretty closely with Winnebago County.
So Mark, you missed our annual budget process because we just finished that up last month. And I was just sharing with Ralph a minute ago that basically I presented it to John Damo as basically unchanged from what you had recommended, that we would just do that with a $34,000 increase to purchase another van. And he didn't seem to be rejecting of that. He said, we'll talk about that at our meeting. So we're scheduled to have our meetings with John now, probably about the middle to later end of, don't have a date yet, but I'll let you know. And then we go through that with John and we kind of firm up the numbers, and although they are subject to change between now and the end of October is when it gets presented to the county board, and then the county board can decide to accept it or make changes at that point as well too. So anyway, so you missed our big budget. We're
I
here.
read about it in the paper, the transportation issue and Silvercrest issue.
Yep, Silvercrest, we're
Good, I agree with
hopefully
everything.
closing on Silvercrest and
Good.
this month.
Congratulations.
Yep.
Board.
So welcome, Mark, appreciate it. And so we'll be rotating again. So this month we're here. Next month's meeting will be in Neenah, and then back and forth over the next couple of months.
I brought the schedule because Pam's been saying. That's
Good.
It's,
All right, so now you're
won't
up
be
to
late
speed.
anymore. So
Now you're up to speed.
yeah, thank you very much. I have those. Oh, no, I don't.
All right, so I'll go back to my report on the biennial budget. So we're talking about that there was some improvements in the ADRC funding. Was it 2 million statewide or?
It was like around 3 million first year of the biennium and 5 million the second year or something along those lines.
So we will get a portion of that for ADRC, but I'm not sure what portion, because they're talking about maybe some of the ADRCs that were less funded are gonna get more money. We'll have to wait and see how that shakes out. Right?
Yeah, they actually said something on Friday that there's potential loss to some ADRCs, which would keep
No,
the
we're not supposed to be creating winners and losers.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And then she backtracked a little and said, at the very least, people would stay the same, and then she said, no, there could be loss. So we have, I don't think with our population, we're at risk of that, but we have no idea what.
Well, I know that Wixa will not take a position of losers, so that won't be Wixa's recommendation.
Which I think why with the PAC was like, no, that's not.
Yeah, That's
not when you get an increase in the statewide budget. Just such a history, the ADRCs throughout the state are funded at different levels, just simply when they became an ADRC. So the first level of ADRCs received funding to do anything and everything they needed. And then as money ran out, the longer you waited to develop an ADRC, the less funding you got. So there are some ADRCs that are barely funded at all and really can't do the minimum. And again, there's some who are not going to say overly funded, but quite flush with funds. So they want to try and fix that with this.
So there were some little tweaks in the budget that are probably a little bit better for us. The funding from the feds hasn't changed, so it's even. Although now that they're doing the unwinding from COVID, some of the funding through Medicaid and some other sources that were extra during the pandemic, so we got extra funding, that will be going away at the end of 24. So it'll still be in there for 24 for the most part, but after 24, we're going to get probably a reduction, only a reduction in the extra amount that they were giving us after 2020. So we'll kind of go back to the way things were in 2019. So it will be a reduction for us in 25, but it's only a reduction because the extra amounts are going to go away. So we'll see how it happens. So we'll see what happens when we get there.
Economic support is getting an increase as well, this year and next year.
2%, I think, right?
Yeah, maybe. Well, I'm just looking here and it's our consortium for the rest of this year is getting 4 million. And that, so this year, base funding percentage 11.05%. And
So it's something that the AD or the Income Maintenance Consortium have been asking about for years, is just give us a % or 2 increase over last year so that we can at least keep up with not even inflation, but at least keep up with some of the extra costs. And this is the first time in the biennial budget they put some money in for that. So that's a good thing.
There's an ADRC question.
Yeah.
A couple months ago, a friend and I went over to Green Bay to visit her cousin, who has some disabilities, and we went to the ADRC Community Cafe. Is that unique to Green Bay, or are there cafes in other places? And if there are we gonna get one?
It is very unique to Green Bay because most of the ADRCs are part of the county. In Brown County, the ADRC is not affiliated with the county.
Right, it's not-
Oh.
So that none of them are county employees. It is affiliated with the Green Bay Senior Center. So
Because I didn't know they were employees. They were all citizen consumers, I thought. They were
well,
all.
the people that were in there. So the cafe you saw that was in the senior center.
Oh,
So
okay.
their ADRC is in their senior center, so they share all of their, first of all, Brown County was one of those first ADRCs who was given anything and everything, so they do have funding to do stuff like that. Secondly, they are in and associated with their senior center, and they do a newsletter, they do everything to share expenses. So they have a very, very unique situation. Really no county can compare themselves to Brown because of the uniqueness of their funding and how they're structured.
Okay.
So unfortunately, though, we've had many requests. We aren't able.
Anybody who goes to Green Bay and wants to try the ADRC cafe, it's nice.
Yeah,
It's
it
good
is.
food.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's a great thing, but that is a one and only.
Okay.
Yep.
That was my only question.
So on the funding stuff, I asked Wix's lobbyist, Chelsea, if she thought could we get anything from the legislature between now and the next biennial budget, which would be 25. And at first she thought that maybe we could make some headway. And then this last meeting I had with her, she said that pretty much the legislators in Madison are not going to be working on any money stuff at all. So we're pretty much going to set our sights now for the next biennial budget, which will be 25, but we'll start working with legislatures in 24, which is next year. We'll start working with them on prepping them for, maybe we can get some better traction in the next biennial budget. Because the state budgets are every 2 years, they're not every year. Anyway, that's the report on that. And, so I guess we could keep going.
Okay.
More on the phone.
All right, number 4, I will entertain a motion to accept the June 5th, 2023 and the July 17th, 2023 Human Services Board
We're
meeting.
gonna move to approve those, not accept them, right? Approve them.
Approve them, I'm sorry, approve them now.
I would, so moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. Then number 5, then we will accept the minutes of the May 9th, 2023 Advisory Committee for Children Voluntary Services and the May 17th, May 16th, 2023 Specialized Transportation Council and the July 10th, 2023 ADRC meeting.
I
I
would
need a
Move to
motion.
accept the ADRC.
I'll
meeting.
second that.
Was made in second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. Number 6, inpatient and institutional placement stats.
Okay, so this is our graph, 3 pages worth, so Mark, it should be somewhere probably toward the back of your packet. Okay, and so this is what we do to basically track, child welfare expensive placements, behavioral health expensive placements, and child welfare, secure detention, foster care placements. So page 1 is Child Welfare Division, Lincoln Hills. We still have our 1 person there as of June. So nothing changing there. On the bottom of page 1 is our residential care centers, which are like our like rawhide type facilities. They're longer term placements, but they're not in a locked facility. They're just in a residential facility. And the number went down a little bit from May to June, which is not really indicative of what's happening. Because it just met with Annette today, and we are still looking at probably having about 5 individuals being in RCCs by the end of this year, or maybe by the end of this summer. So those placement numbers are gonna go up, which is probably gonna result in about $1 million worth of extra spending in RCCs this year. Annette and her crew are doing the best she can to try to find alternatives, but we are even hunting multiple states away for placements. We just got one accepted in Tennessee.
Is this because there's not enough beds or because?
Because
they're
nobody in the
specialized?
state of Wisconsin will accept them for that level of placement, even though we keep asking.
Okay.
So just be on the lookout that you'll see that number climbing as we get into the fall. And that's only because we know that's occurring right now. And we're gonna do our best to try to change that, but
And just a notice in case there are some county board members who are watching this later.
Yeah.
This is why we can't, why our budgets are so often skewed. Suddenly we got $1 million worth of kids that need, and it's not like we have a choice. We have to do something for them. We're responsible for them. So did you budget for these $1 million kids? No, but we got a budget for them now.
Yep.
And the
Yeah.
kids who are there, Annette, are they doing well? The ones, the 1 point whatever, and the 2.1.
One of them is doing well, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
the other ones are, they're in the place that will accept them, and we're doing our best to try to make it work. And some of them we're in a holding pattern right now. We're trying to make that work. So Beth and her crew are working diligently and with extra
Yeah, you mean
effort
Annette.
to try to.
But you take care of
And
it.
At times, but.
Hand over to Beth.
Beth and that other.
I was saying, others got a roll.
And everybody's
Whatever
working.
your day is.
Everybody's working hard.
Everybody works together.
Everybody is working hard.
Yes, we do.
Okay, page 2, behavioral health division, and here you can see again where we're gonna be over
That went way up.
in our budget again this year, and this is the other area where we could be over $500,000 by the end of the year, maybe more than that, is in our adult hospital placements. And again, we're kind of at the mercy of who comes in and whether or not we can divert them into something less expensive and less intensive. And we have had a run on those admissions lately. And Heather, what's the forecast for the next 3 months?
We're doing the best we can to get ahead of the situation and doing more regular meetings with some of the care management organizations, because that's actually where we're finding the trickiest place of getting individuals out of Winnebago mental health is when they're enrolled and need a group home placement, is with the caregiver shortage. They're not finding that alternative placement, that lesser restrictive setting, and they're individuals that are too vulnerable and can't live out on their own. It's not safe enough to. So we're meeting more regularly with care management organizations to try to get ahead of some of the situations.
So some of these 6.7 are managed care people. And since they're in Winnebago or whatever, then we end up paying for them.
Yep, they're ours.
They're ours, even though they're theirs, that's the ongoing battle we have with the.
What's the
managed
difference
care.
between actively treating them because they have an active psychiatric illness and now they're done, they've been treated,
Right,
they're stabilized, the hospital wants them out, and the care organization says, well, we don't have a place for them to go. And the hospital can't release them and make it the care organization's problem
we can,
because they're prohibited by law from just putting people out on the street. And so the dilemma then is that we end up paying
paying for.
for days of warehousing a person.
It
Not
doesn't
being
need to be in the
actively
hospital.
in the
but
hospital,
they're
that
there.
don't need to be there.
Right.
And so the state has basically gone, and so it's our problem.
This is a managed care issue?
Yeah, like,
This is a state of Wisconsin not holding managed care organizations responsible for getting their members out.
That's been a problem for a while.
yeah.
It's been a
that's
problem for 10 years.
We've been
10 years.
battling that for a while.
And we sometimes have a period of time where we have no problems because we don't have this situation.
Sure.
And now we have had the largest amount of problem that we've had in quite a while.
I don't remember the last time we didn't have somebody that is enrolled in a care management organization at Winnebago or Mendota or
Yeah.
Some other facility.
So then the managed care, a company is not required to pay, so they just.
No, and we've asked that they be required to pay, we've asked that they be held accountable, we've asked for everything from the state, and the state has basically ignored us.
Yeah, there's money being exchanged there, I think.
Or just, they
Yeah, our
wanna,
money
they
is,
wanna
yeah.
turn a blind eye to it. I think sometimes it's not so much that there's a benefit, the state's not seeing any benefit from it, but the state's turning a blind eye to it
That's correct.
because they don't have any teeth. They don't believe they have any teeth to be able to hold a managed care organization accountable for that.
And then the thing that we get into is the managed care really trying to get these people out? Or are they saying they just can't find places for them because they're not responsible for them, for the pay? That's the way we run into it.
So in the interim, we're stuck with probably another $500,000 worth of bills.
We've also seen an increase in meth-induced psychosis as well, and that's a really
Say it again, what kind?
meth-induced
Oh, meth,
psychosis.
okay.
Meth use. It turns into more like a delusional disorder, and that's really difficult to treat for individuals. So the higher acuity private hospitals aren't able to take it. Some of them aren't able to function at full capacity either right now. So we're trying to work with them, trying to get people into treatment. So we're working on it. I don't know if the number will be down now for July, but
Well, we're tracking it.
Yep.
And this is maybe a question for you or maybe for Janet, I don't know. So in our next year, we've got this budgeted, a budget ADP for about 4.5 citizens in behavioral health, especially hospitals.
Mhm.
And now we're at 6.7.
Mhm.
What do we budget for next year? If we're budgeted at 4.5, about 4.5 people this year,
We
what
budgeted a little more,
we did a
but
little bit.
not, but
Yeah,
not.
but not
this-
6.7.
Not the size of this, no.
we're hoping that this is just an odd time of year. Typically, we see a higher increase in like suicide attempts, higher acuity in the springtime. This year, we've definitely seen it throughout. So it's continued a little longer than typical and maybe a little bit more acute the last couple of months versus that earlier spring. This
Because it looks like in the spring, the numbers were way down.
It's been a little bit different this year is think all of us have been talking about that, is this is typically the slower time of year, and it's not right now.
I would project right now for the end of the year, I'd say we're probably gonna be $1.5 million between child welfare and behavioral health. Will probably be $1.5 million greater expense than we were last year if things don't change. So we have to factor that into what we'll be talking about upcoming in the financials. I'll kind of talk about how that's gonna look then at the end of the year.
What would you say the reason is? I mean, when you look back all the years, you've been pretty consistent, and all of a sudden, what made it different this year in all these categories?
She said meth was one of them.
Just one, okay, but is that it?
The managed care organizations and the fact that they won't take our kids at residential.
But they always took them before?
Well, no, we have,
They took them before, right?
because we have had many years of not needing to use these services. We don't know whether they would have taken our kids or not, okay? We don't know. I mean, I would tell you that I think that this year is more like a potentially traditional year, in the sense that no matter what we do, how good we are, we're not gonna prevent everybody from needing to go to the hospital or needing to go to an RCC. Okay, but we had so many good years where we had practically nobody going there, year after year after year.
So next
People
year
start-
is just taking
people
money to not
started
pay
to-
it out.
People started to believe that this was never gonna happen. And so then we have a year like we have this year, and it's like, well, what are you doing wrong? How come you can't control this? And it's like, we never could control it in the first place. We just had like this feast of really good years, year after year, for a lot of years. And now we're getting a year where we're not controlling things. And basically, they weren't controllable anyway, even those other years. We just didn't have the people showing up. This year, we're having a lot of people showing up all at once. It's sort of like, you know, statistically, how many times are you going to see, you keep, you know, doing heads and tails, heads and tails and heads and tails, right? And I keep throwing up the coin. We're gonna get a slew sometimes of where they're all tails. And then at some point, we could get a slew where we have a bunch of all heads at the same time. So I think we've had a bunch of tail years where we didn't have any costs. And so now all of a sudden it's shifted, and now we started to get a couple of heads. And now the costs are going up, and it's like, well, why can't you just keep getting tails? It's like, well, it depends on how things go, where these people come from. Some of which we can control if they're from us and we know of them and we've been working with them. But if they're new people and we don't control that, I mean, their costs can go through the roof.
The caregiver shortage has had a huge impact, whether it's infant to aging. You know, the residential care treatments can't find adequate and appropriate and number of trained staff. The managed care organizations contract with providers, and they've got providers who are calling them on Monday to say we have no staff as of Friday. So, you know, there's a lot of partnerships, a lot of people that are trying to prevent all of this, but really when you ask about something being different, the incredible caregiver shortage is
So other
incredibly
counties,
impactful.
do other counties have the same situation?
Oh, sure.
So now all of a sudden now they're saying, okay, we're stopping everybody. And so everyone's got the same. issue.
Now, so on some of the other counties, they may have had those heads years, you know, in the last couple of years. And so maybe they're having a tail year, meaning that maybe they don't have the numbers of people this year. So if you ask, like Outagamie, if I asked them, what kind of year are you having? They might not be having a bad year, but part of that might be is that they're not running those kinds of cases. Like we weren't running those kinds of cases the last 7 years. So it's really a matter of like who you get. And human services, it's a lot of, we just have to deal with what we get. And sometimes we have good years where we don't have a lot of problems. In other years, we have multiple kids, multiple adults with very severe deep end issues, and now we got to deal with them. And now, as Beth said, we have a provider shortage. So therefore, the providers that were there in years past that could help us aren't there now. So now we have to do the best we can. And at the end of it, you just have to put people in placements, expensive placements. So hopefully we start, you know, I'm hoping that by the end of the year, we'll start leveling out again, and maybe some of these things won't continue on, and then we'll be okay. But even if we swing $1 million or $2 million greater with expenses, I think this year we can still handle it within our budget that we'll still end up with somewhat of a surplus again. That's the good news.
Right.
Can we do it year after year? No.
No,
But
but
can
this is
can
kind
we
of,
still end up with a surplus? Probably.
this is just kind of an odd thing. I mean, Heather's right. I mean, in my 34 years at Winnebago, our summertime is our downtime because people are out in the streets and you don't have as much suicide or whatever. And then as the weather gets cold and that, then our population starts getting a little bit, this year, a little bit different. I mean, we're high in the summertime, which they normally aren't. I mean, that's
Winnebago,
just-
yep, and Winnebago mental health as a whole is running over right now,
Right,
where
right.
they have been in
Right,
years
well,
past.
summertime's always been downtime. I mean, it's just
Does the pandemic, post-pandemic have anything to do with any of this?
Probably.
probably, some of it has to do with it, yeah. But like I say, it's just a shift and this doesn't, like Bill said, we've been lucky in the past years to not have this, but you run into about 4 or 5 difficult situations and there's not much you can do. I mean, you gotta deal with what you got.
When I was up north, I'll just use an example of Lincoln Hills, when I was up in Marinette County, we hardly ever had anybody go to Lincoln Hills. And then one year, we had a crime wave and 4 or 5 kids were convicted of some pretty serious breaking and enterings in multiple cottages around Marinette County. So we had to put 5 kids at Lincoln Hills all in 1 year. And it basically bottomed out our budget. And we were in deficits for like the next 2 or 3 years because there wasn't enough money in the budget to handle it. So why did that happen? Why did 5 kids go to Marinette County and commit a bunch of robberies? I don't know, but they did, and then it became our problem. So that's sometimes how it happens.
And could you have seen this coming? No.
No, you can't prepare for it.
No.
Hopefully, like you say, it'll level off somewhat.
Yeah, because
Sometimes.
even if you look at our average, it's still below budgeted amount for the adult here too, so hopefully it's still, even though this looks alarming, it's
yeah.
still, over looking at the whole year.
But if I forecast with the same scenario happening, we'll probably be about $1.5 million right now, the way it looks. If it continues through year end. Okay, bottom of page 2, behavioral health division, specialty hospitals, that's kids. And the line from May to June went down. And that one is like a bouncing ball too. We'll see how that goes throughout the next several months. Page 3 is our security detention, which is Fond du Lac or juvenile jail. And that's showing a little bit of reduction into June, but again, that bounces around depending on where we need to have kids. And then last but not least is foster care. Bottom of, well, there's kinship too, but bottom of page 3 is foster care. That's staying about the same at about 38. And then page 4, we've been tracking kinship placements for you. Well, actually, we've had numbers from multiple years, but that's down a little bit at 135. Okay, so that's the report on placement.
Any questions?
Just a comment on that, Foster, I mean, the budget is 75 and we're like half of that, so that's pretty good, whatever you're doing.
Yep.
Right?
Gotta keep them at home.
That's definitely gonna be successful.
Financials.
Okay, that's me because Janet's on vacation. And again, I'm not gonna be answering any questions, especially from Jeff, because last year I got a question from Jeff and I completely botched it. And then I had to have Janet fix it the next month. So Jeff, do not ask me any tough questions. All right, so what I gathered from what Janet was trying to tell me about, and I'm looking at this page first, not the graphs.
Okay.
This is kind of where we're tracking how we're doing year to date. We are a little bit over in labor, but Janet would tell us that that's because we made the adjustments for the wage changes from the study. And so we haven't squared that up yet with, I think with finance and
Right.
HR. So that's why it's showing a little bit of a deficit. Travel is favorable, still at 6.9%. Capital was nothing because we didn't have a purchase this year for a van. Operating expenses, we're still favorable by about 10% in terms of our costs. And revenues, revenues are favorable by 4.5%. And, okay, overall, levy income. And this is what the projection is, at 3.2 million surplus at the end of the year. So even if we have $1.5 million deficit, we'd still show a favorable surplus at the end of the year. From the way I read it. So that's kind of where we are. And on the graphs, the only thing on these graphs that I could tell you is the one that sticks out to me is the one on the top where it says monthly expenses versus budgeted monthly expenses. We definitely paid off a lot of bills in June. And I don't know why that's a little bit more than the other months, but I see that that's a little bit higher than the average, so.
3 payroll a month too.
Oh, yeah, 3 payroll a month, yeah.
Yep, and also our budgeted revenue came in a little bit less than expected, but that bounces around. And typically, we see more revenue over what we expected coming toward the end of the year. That's when we get our windfalls. Also, I'm gonna talk about this now if I can. So this was a request from Harold from last month, which is to give a report on any of our revenues that were unanticipated and what they look like. And so, and again, Harold, if you got specific questions, I'm gonna ask you to hold off to talk to Janet when she comes back, because she's the one that put this together. And I don't have any more information for you other than what's on the page here. Basically, she's saying from prior year intergovernmental revenue, we ended up with 264 extra dollars in long-term support that was unanticipated. Income maintenance, a 2020 true up, which is 60,000 more than we anticipated. Income maintenance 21 true up, $726. Income maintenance 2021 enhanced federal distribution of funds, 224,000. These are all unanticipated from what we thought about for our budget this year. Additional state reallocation of funds for child care administration, 11,000. And then revenues, we got 198,000 more in Medicaid reimbursement than we expected. Looks like expansion WIMCR reimbursement. Children's long-term support, that's best area. We have additional offset of monies because the program has to be fully funded. So that's also probably going to go out for expenses. So don't get too wound up about that number, because that money is probably going to be gone by the end of the year. Community mental health services block grant, we got 130,000 more than we anticipated. And supplemental funding, subsidized guardianships, greater state reimbursement, 107,000. Elderly outreach and nutrition programs, greater level of eligibility program activity, 621,000. That's probably heading out the door too, right, Beth?
Most right now.
Yeah, and third-party insurance, more claims, and increased revenue from those claims, 310,000. So that's what we're showing right now as unanticipated from what the budget we planned on for the budget for this year.
This is income, all of it is income.
So all of this could add to the surplus, although those couple of things I mentioned, there's expense related to those. So those two probably, about $1 million worth of this is probably gonna go out as much as it's coming in. So, but the rest of it could add to our surplus. And that's what you want to know.
Am I reading this right? This is 2022 unanticipated revenue, not this year's unanticipated revenue?
So sometimes the unanticipated revenue is coming to us from prior years that show up this year. The state doesn't give us some of their money for like 1.5 years, 2 years after it was showing up. So this is why we always have that unanticipated money group that goes into our surplus. That's different from our regular anticipated revenue versus expenditures. Okay.
Harold.
I just got to push it down. Number one, I'm very happy to see that last number. the 310,000.
Yep.
That the staff are working hard to collect insurance.
Yes.
I mean, they deserve a pat on the back for that. But what I'm confused about is what Mark said to Beth. Yes, what are you talking about, this elderly outreach and nutrition program? What was gonna happen about that?
We received, like what Bill said, most of it going away, this was unanticipated COVID funds, so we received a lot of additional funds for nutrition programs, caregiver programs, transportation, just most of our elderly programs received a boost during COVID that wasn't in the budget because we didn't know any of this was gonna be happening. But like you said, it's gonna be going away. So
When we turn around and spend it, like give it,
I think he's straight mind, keep bringing it on. You're saying that this extra money is not gonna be there.
correct.
Right.
Yeah.
oh, okay. Anything else?
You know?
Looking at Harold.
No.
So anyway, we're just trying to give you a handle on where does this extra money come from and why is it coming in so that it's more in real time as opposed to, we just tell you about it at the end of the year when we have the total amount, we tell you X amount of it was unanticipated. This is actually, as we go through the year, this is kind of where it comes in. And some of it goes back out in expense. Some of it just stays put because we don't have an expense that we attach it to.
I just want to compliment the staff too. That's great, that type of turnaround. 'Cause I know a lot of counties are in the red. This is great job, staff. Thank you.
Any other questions?
The only one I would have is, we talked about the pandemic money. Are we making plans? Certain things, the pandemic's not, money's not gonna be around. I mean, it takes $621,000. You gotta make that up somewhere. And you don't want to start the year off, where we gotta go. We're making plans to cover that or try to find a place to do, or we're gonna discontinue the service, or what do you do?
Well, we still budget for the old, what we're gonna do is budget for the old money. In 2025, we're gonna take a deeper look at, okay, we were budgeting at this amount, but really our amounts from 2019 were really these. And we probably gotta start thinking about, this is how much money we're gonna have for nutrition in 25. So we're gonna have to plan for that and then adjust accordingly with our contracts to go back to the amounts that we think we're gonna get. Or same thing with service. We probably aren't gonna have the extra cash that we're getting in for behavioral health. So we can't be building programs or building staff on those numbers. Are gonna have to build it on the lesser numbers. So what do? We basically know which ones are going down and.
But you're using the 19 numbers instead of using the 621
Yeah.
for this one
Right.
example, right? You
Yeah.
gotta go back.
I mean, it's been a while now.
But these are not all COVID, because we always
Okay.
get the,
Yeah, I was addressing the ones that we know are COVID.
COVID, that's kind of what I was thinking, of what's gonna be different. And
An
there's that,
example would be if you bring up meals. During the heat of COVID, there weren't meal sites. There was all home delivered meals. So home delivered meals cost a lot more than having a meal site. Now that the meal sites are open,
You go
whole
back.
other story, right, Harold? The cost will go down.
Down,
So when you asked about cutting services, we are able to adjust and adapt to what was in place then. It's not a cut for us. It's, we don't need that extra money because we're operating like Bill said. Does that make sense?
right, yeah, okay. And the last question would be, is I know there's talk about with all the pandemic money that went out there, if it's not used a certain period of time, they're gonna start taking money back. They're gonna start investigating. We don't have anything like that.
We don't have any of that.
We're gonna have money sitting.
I think they're talking more about big grants that were given to organizations or to counties. And if you don't use it, they might try to get it back. But the county board decided to take the money out of ARPA and put it into a different account that you guys refer to as the Spirit Fund. That now money is not available by the feds to be gotten back because it's not under ARPA anymore. So it's safe. For instance, I'm just using that example. Okay,
Alright, going in. How's our elevator doing?
all right, I know the answer to this question.
Is it a good answer, or are we gonna stone you?
Okay, Mike Elder, this morning, and when I said to him, I need to give a report today, what is going on with the elevator? He said three things.
Uh-oh.
Next week, there is a meeting with the people who are putting in the elevator to go over the plan. And the plan will start on August 14th. So they will start August 14th to dismantle the current elevator and take it out, and they will replace it with all new parts. Starting on the 14th, they're not sure how long it's gonna take. They think maybe about a week. And they have all of the parts. They have all of the parts. So they can't say they don't have the parts. Now, do they have the labor and will they stay on it? That's a good question. But the manufacturer said that they're the company that's working on it is meeting with Mike and his crew, I believe this week, to basically go over the plan. And then starting on the 14th, they start fixing it.
So do we get a new elevator?
So everything, the guts of the elevator, everything, I think the doors themselves that open are the only parts that are gonna remain.
Yes.
The rest of it inside will be completely redone,
Okay, I do have a question.
completely.
When you're starting to gut this thing, I don't know how long it's been sitting in there, but are there hazardous things in that shaft?
That's
that you're
all
gonna have to-
in, that's all in the accepted proposal and they all know about
You
that.
may have to take some people out of this building. during
Nobody's
this-
saying that we have to leave the building. Now, will there be a ruckus around the elevators?
I'm sure it'll be noisy, but I'm concerned about hazardous stuff.
Nobody said anything about
Like
having.
asbestos or lead or
Yes.
something, is
Nobody
that
said
what
anything.
you're
Yes.
I don't even think
Not
there shouldn't be any in the elevator.
That elevator was actually part of the new addition to the building. And the new addition was built, what I was told, sometime in the 90s.
Yeah, so it.
So, I mean, it's not, that elevator is not that old. The actual elevator that we use every day,
In the back.
which
yeah.
is in the back in the old part, that's from
Great.
1925. I don't know what's in that elevator.
But you better hope it never breaks down.
But it hasn't broken down yet, so we're still using it as our only elevator.
Okay,
And there's no, as far as I know from Mike Elder, he's not planning on improving that one. So I guess that one's just gonna remain the old elevator and
okay.
we're gonna get the new elevator. He thinks it's a bad design that they only designed this building with one new elevator and it should have been designed with two, but they only built one. So hopefully this new one will last now for the next 25, 30 plus years.
Okay.
And we
Unlike
wanna-
the other one that's lasted nearly 100.
Now, this one is being built with parts that Mike Elder told me that the parts that it's gonna be built with are gonna be more generic, meaning that if it does break down in the
They can find
future,
parts.
it won't be proprietary to any one company, so that they can't go, well, you got an X elevator, so you can only use X parts. So Mike
So
said
my
that
idea
they-
all along of going to need a foundry to build us something, it could happen if we needed it. They could,
Well, that it will be able to be fixed with non-proprietary
Yay.
parts in the future,
yay.
which means hopefully they'll be able to replace a circuit board. If one goes out, it won't be like impossible to find. So,
Good.
but it starts on the 14th.
Like
I'm
I say,
just putting you on notice that I'm still checking periodically with your staff about
The water.
water, and they all say
Water's good.
water is,
Yep, the water's good.
well, good.
You got a swimming pool here I didn't know about?
So what?
Is there a swimming pool here? You're talking about the water?
no, but they had no drinking, they had no potable water in this building
Son of a-
for,
I thought there's a pool here.
I don't know how long, it was
Really?
months.
We had water issues, we had issues with water fountains. And we've got them now replaced and the water is good and the
Good,
fountains
good.
are cold, so.
Yep. Well, good. I'm glad that,
Anyway, that's the,
I'll
that's
take
the
a week
elevator.
compared to, it's almost been a year since the census.
Must be
This is
replacing
very
everything.
good news,
Yeah.
Bill.
Must
I'll
be
take a
replacing
week.
because they're not prepared. I mean, they haven't had it apart yet, so they must be replacing everything, because when you take it apart, like when I do anything, I always, oh, I need another part that I didn't plan on, or something else is broken. But
They
must be
plan to
doing the whole
replace
thing.
every single
Single
part,
part.
every single part is gonna be brand new. The only thing that'll be the same as the doors.
Alright. Good. Alright. Renee, Deputy Director.
So what we've been working on lately is budget, of course, because it is budget time. We don't have an exact date yet when we meet with county exec to review with him our budget, but it's usually the end of August. Just be here before you know it. You may recall last month when we had our budget meeting, I prefaced with, yep, we came in at our numbers, but that didn't include any of our asks. You know, we did what they asked us to do. So Bill and I, and along with the managers, have been having those discussions because now is the time, right? If we have other service needs, if we have other staffing needs, I mean, we always have some kind of need, but we know that we have to prepare a prioritized, reasonable request. And so we're starting to have some of those conversations. The other thing, I'm pausing because I think we let you guys know about this. In June, we had an incident in Neenah where law enforcement arrived and we had to evacuate the building. Did we tell you about this?
No, I don't think
Oh,
so.
okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was one of our clients who showed up in the Neenah building with a knife and was actually threatening his girlfriend.
Who worked there?
No, they're both clients.
Oh, okay.
Who showed up. You know, how Heather mentioned, meth-induced psychosis
yes.
earlier. So of course, later we learned, it was clear to staff that were interacting with him that he was high or, you know, under the influence of something. We just didn't know what at the time. And it was pretty bad. It was pretty scary. I mean, nobody got hurt, but just meaning his actions, his behaviors, he's threatening to hurt himself mostly. So, from what we understand, his intention was not to come in there and hurt our staff. But however, when things like that happen, it really tests our protocols, our process. You know, we can have the best plan in place, but if you got folks who get rattled, and understandably so, or forget, you know, we've had a lot of turnover, especially at the front desk and reception, both first and second floor, and that's usually where stuff happens, is right in our lobby. And that's where it started. Went up to second floor. Luckily, we had some staff that knew him, or of course, are very well skilled in de-escalation and still understanding, okay, we have to work together to get him at least down from the second floor and hopefully out of our building. And so luckily we had a couple of staff who were able to do that. What they found is he was wanting to smoke, among other things. I mean, he was kind of threatening people and I'm gonna hurt myself, and held the knife to his neck. A lot of our staff saw that. And so of course, you know, folks I think 911 got maybe 3 or 4 calls from different people in our building, which is great. We'd rather more calls than not enough. So their 911 is trying to give direction. Neenah PD was there within, I want to say less than 10 minutes, maybe even 8. I don't know exactly. So they surrounded our building and our parking lot, and the direction was for our staff to evacuate.
How'd they evacuate? They didn't use the lobby?
We have a building to the rear.
Okay.
I forget the name. What's the name of that street? Anyway,
Yeah.
the back street
Okay.
behind the building. Yep. Anyway, he must have been saying something that he wanted to smoke or something, and he had enough sense. So here was the saving grace. He had enough sense that he knew he had to go outside to smoke. So our staff were like, yeah, I really want to smoke. Great, let's go outside. Let's go outside. You need a lighter? Like, sure, we'll find you one. Come on, let's go. So they were able to get him down to the first floor vestibule in both of our buildings. You know, we have the doors to the
Right.
parking lot, and then there's a vestibule, and then we have another doors into the actual lobby.
Right.
Both buildings are the same. So our staff were able to get him into the vestibule. I don't know how they did it, how to him to go first. And he stepped in the vestibule and they closed the door behind him and quickly locked it. And by the time he realized he was alone in the vestibule, the doors were already locked and law enforcement was outside. So in a nutshell, that's what happened. Luckily, no one was hurt, but my point is, it really tested our process. And as you know, we have two other departments. We have Veterans and Health Department in NENA. So back here, I'll say back at base camp, you know, we as our executive management team, you know, those of us in the room today, realize we already knew, like, you know, we had some good processes that didn't work. We got some other processes that we didn't have. So we got some stuff to work on. So what we did is we had an after action review meeting. We had one with the warming shelter too, last December, where you get together and you talk about what worked, what didn't, what do you need? So we just received, managers haven't seen it yet. We just received the recommendations. So anyone that was involved, we got law enforcement's take on it. We got facilities take on it. So lots of people give their input, you know, from their position, like this would have helped, or this didn't work, or I didn't know, blah, blah. Okay, so we gathered all that information. Shelley from the health department did the report. We just got it. There's a lot in there in terms of training, building, evacuation, emergency guides, like a lot of different sections. And so it's, again, there's a lot there. And so our next steps is, how do we break that down? You know, and who do we need at the table? Do we need 3 different work groups? Do we need just one work group to tackle the whole thing? That's where we're at with it. So the reason I'm telling you about is A, we wanted you to know. I'm sorry we didn't tell you in June when it happened, or July. And then B, you will probably hear us continue to update you on whether we need, or whether we're having more training in the building. You know, Ralph, you may remember you got a letter from one of our staff last fall. We actually had the sheriff's department come in and do a walkthrough. Like what can we do? You know, within reason, because some of it is we need another elevator, we need another staircase out to the parking lot, a stairwell. Okay, well, that isn't something that Bill and I can just like, okay, sure, we'll build you a stairwell. You know, obviously that goes through however other money committees and departments, you know, to make things like that happen. But there are like training, in terms of training our staff, that we can do. Like this group, we can train staff all day long. Like that's what we need. So you get my point in the sense that there are some big asks and then there's some smaller ones. So that's where we're at.
And I assume we did some sort of thing for our employees for any kind of trauma.
We did.
And are you still looking for some sort of delayed reaction in terms of some sort of trauma?
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. I think for those that were more directly involved, they happened to be on Heather's team and then a couple on of Annette's team who responded. So those folks are more in touch with their managers, who, to your point, I think are constantly having those conversations. You know, how are you? What do you need? What else does this bring up for you? It's kind of our thing. And
one of the things the exec directed me to do, and I'm in talks right now with a national organization called the National Council on Behavioral Health and Wellbeing. When we were out at NACO this past weekend, Larry was at the presentation. There was a presentation on something called mental health first aid. And we're going to get the gal who presented that hopefully here for at least a day and basically do a number of in-person trainings with county staff that want to know more about how to just handle people who are talking about not doing well at work, having mental health issues or having substance issues, and maybe they mention it to their colleague. And so a lot of times people don't know what to say. They don't know if they should react to it or not react to it. And so this behavioral health first aid training is kind of meant for all county employees to kind of get the basics on, like if somebody's going to bring up something, if you think somebody is not doing well, what to say, what not to say, how to like know what to do. And it's called mental health first aid. So that's going to be planned for the fall. And we're going to get the person who did it at NACO, hopefully do the trainings. Everybody liked her. Thought she did a good job. And so I'm working on some dates and times for that. And that's going to be county-wide. So anybody who's a county employee We don't know if there'll be family members that'll be invited, but at least county employees who can take part in that. As one of many steps that Annette, that Renee is talking
Yeah.
about.
It was very good. It was how to recognize and how to talk and deal with mental illness, really. Very good.
And your colleagues, if you see.
And your colleagues, yeah.
If you see something happening.
Very good.
As I think about the social worker, I don't want to specify, social worker who called me sometime after an incident that involved her. And when she called me, she was in tears. And it didn't happen the next day. She was kind of reliving it. And I realized these things hit you sometimes later. And I have on occasion checked with her manager, how is she doing? Apparently okay, but these things can sometimes, you know,
They can.
the day of the attack, everything seemed okay. Next couple weeks, all of a sudden, something triggers something that sets you off, but you're watching this, and I'm
So
glad.
there'll be a series of things that'll be recommendations that Renee and I'll go over, and we'll, you know, if we need to bring some here, we'll talk about it here.
We do crisis debriefings after them, and several of us here have been trained, and we have staff trained, and we did that with these people. And part of that is also about that long-term, how are they doing long-term, and some tools and tips for them and who to go back to. So we did offer 3 or 4 sessions.
Yeah, so it happened on a Tuesday and we had sessions on Wednesday and Thursday. So that fast, we were able to pull those together. As luck would have it, the following week, so also in June, you may have heard about it in the news, right out here in Washington. This didn't have anything to do with our building. But there was a man walking down the street with a pickaxe.
Yeah.
And he had started, he was next door at the Masonic Lodge and taking the axe to the building. One of our staff happened to notice it and was like, you know, are you working there? Just what's happening? You know, but it wasn't long. From what I understand, no one from our building even called 911. They were about to, but officers had him surrounded and had Washington Street barricaded off. Just happened to happen right in front of our building the week after. 2 weeks ago, this was after hours. We have staff work after hours. Janet's usually here till 6. And we have gentlemen in our parking lot, not a consumer, but in our parking lot approaching our staff. When Janet tried to leave, he was standing in front of her vehicle, wouldn't let her leave. You know, we have our cameras. Remember, we upgraded our security system last year. Thank you very much, or January 1st. So where I'm going with all this is it's very much a reality for us that these types of things happening in or around our building are increasing and tend to be more likely.
I don't know how close it was to you, but a couple weeks ago in Neenah, like at Winnebago in commercial or something, and because I was seeing on the news, you know, you have to take a different, you know, and that's how I go to church when I'm going to church in Neenah. And this is gonna block my thing. So there was a standoff, there was something going on, and that's not that far from where your building is. And I don't know if that impacted you or not, but it was somewhere that area was being closed off.
I didn't hear about it,
Okay.
but my point in sharing all of this with you, as Ralph, you got a letter from one of our staff who happens to work here in the basement and doesn't feel very safe in the event if there would be something happen, is, you know, we need, it's not something we just look at every time something happens, but my point is we need to continue to assess and review probably more frequently than we are. And as Bill said, there may be some asks that come out of this, but of course we take not only our clients, but our employee safety, you know, very, very seriously.
Yeah.
And one question backwards.
Thanks for that.
But
On the budget again, and you might have covered it because I wasn't here the last month, but I know at one time you talked about doing a budget normal, and then
I gotta do
the
it.
executive wanted to do this comparison thing.
We're not doing it this year.
They didn't do it at all?
Nope.
Okay, because I was curious the way he was talking about.
Yeah, the
priority
reason,
thing,
well, you weren't here, and I said that,
Yeah.
that
inventory.
there's 3 parts to the training for priority-based budgeting. We got through most of 2 of the 3 processes, and then there's still a 3rd process that we have to learn yet, and so it's not ready, and it wasn't gonna be ready for budget time, so it's now kind of postponed until later this fall. And so it'll be a thing next year, but it's not gonna be a thing this year.
Anything else? Bill?
Okay, well, what's left? So I'm not gonna steal Larry's thunder because Larry went to
You can just do whatever you want.
all of the NACO events related to human services. I went to most of them too, when I was down in Texas. I will say one thing about Texas is it doesn't matter what the temperature is, it's just hot. Okay, it is, when people go, how's the weather? Hot. Nobody, we talk about like, oh, it's in the 70s or the 80s. No. In Texas, it's like, it's hot. Meaning,
Dallas?
it's always
No,
over,
Austin.
it was Austin.
Oh.
It was always over 100 degrees.
108.
And it didn't cool down at night because all day long, the buildings absorb all of that heat.
Yeah.
And so when you're walking down the street at night, it's still 100 degrees because it's just radiating off of all of the buildings and the concrete and the sidewalks. And it's like, it never gets cool. It's like, it's always hot. So I will tell you, I'm not a fan of Austin, Texas, in the summertime at least. And they said this is pretty typical, although they had the most days of over 100 degrees that they've had for the last several summers. So they've just had a lot of 100+ degree days. I think it was around 105, 106 every
108,
day.
108. But that was your typical, because it's hotter than heck outside, but inside it's still colder than hell.
Yeah, because they got the air conditioning.
The air conditioning just
Right.
cranked up, so
Yeah.
the convention center was just freezing.
Well, it's 40 degrees difference.
Oh, I know.
So, that's what I remember most about Austin was the temperatures. I did eat a lot of barbecue, well, barbecue anything, but I mean, so you basically go around, you go, what is anybody having? It's always gonna be barbecue something. So it was good. I mean, there was no question, it was good food.
It was good food, different food.
But the NACO convention was good, attended by probably just about as many as normally go. Several thousand, I would guess. And a lot of good presentations. I will say that the focus of most of what I attended in human services, if I would tell you what the theme was, I would say it was housing shortage and workforce shortage. That was what, I mean, so we talked a lot about mental health, we talked a lot about substance use and about ways that people are dealing with it in counties, but really it boiled down to housing and work. Not enough housing, not enough work, not enough workers. So that would be the theme that I heard.
Right, and most of it was, like I said, most of mine, cause I'm on health, human services and education. Most of it was a lot of mental health, a lot of child welfare, stuff like this. It was the drug addiction.
Yeah, drug addiction is still there. And, at the federal level, the one thing they're looking at is trying to take xylazine, which is a narcotic for animals, used for, kind of painkiller for animals. And it's now being mixed with drugs for humans. And it's called the xylazine epidemic. And right now the test strips for xylazine are illegal. And so like we can provide test strips for opioid addiction to help people know when there's like when they're using fentanyl test strips. Those aren't illegal. We can distribute those to people, but we can't distribute test strips for xylazine. So
Why would the test strips be illegal?
because it's part of what's considered paraphernalia for xylazine, and it's illegal in every state. So right now, if public health is distributing those strips, they're distributing them illegally, and yet a lot of public health is distributing them. And I think we are to some extent.
I think we are already. Yeah.
I think we are as well, but it's actually considered illegal across the country. And so they're trying to author federal legislation to at least take out the test strips from the illegal part.
Was the idea that you can grind them up and then inject them or something?
I don't know,
I don't know.
just that they were still part of that whole paraphernalia
Yeah.
thing, So that's the one thing new there. Specialty housing for people who are recovering from mental illness and drug abuse, or it's a hot priority, as well as housing for other groups, but
A lot of demonstrations on tiny homes and stuff,
yeah,
communities.
it's tiny homes.
It was very, they had, this one company was, you can put up this temporary home in a matter of an hour. I mean, had no bathroom in it or whatever, but it was a shelter that they could put up and put down, you know, it's metal within an hour. Take it down.
But the whole thing was basically, we gotta come up with more ideas to help with the housing shortage, the workforce shortage. Because without that, we can't really even make a dent in the other issues that we're trying to work on. So anyway, I got a lot out of it. I appreciate it going. The other thing I wanted to mention is that WICSA, the state organization, has two meetings in the year. One is in May. Some of you went to the May meeting. I think, Ralph, you went to the May meeting. You did too, Larry. The May meeting now is going to be for board members and for other people to attend. So the May meeting is going to be the big one of the year. The December one, which is like a shorter conference, is now going to be totally focused on directors and managers and other staff to go to that. So if you were thinking about going to the December one, which is going to be in Wausau this year, it really isn't for board members at all. It's going to be, all of the breakouts are going to be for staff. And they did that intentionally because they wanted to have one that was more technical in nature. And so if you all want to attend next year, the next year's one in May will be the one that you'll want to go to. And we're not sure where it's going to be. We think it's probably going to end up being in Stevens Point. This past year was in Elkhart Lake. So the next meeting that you all could potentially attend is in May next year. Also, I wanted to report that we had a regional board member WICSA unofficial meeting. I say unofficial because it's not really part of WICSA and the bylaws anymore, but we had one. It was at Fox Valley Tech and it was the end of June. And a number of you attended that. I don't have another date yet, but I'm thinking it's going to be fall, like maybe October, and we'll have it again. And this time we got approval that it'll be at the Coughlin Center here, so that if any of you want to attend that, you don't have to go as far, because we used to have it at Appleton at Fox Valley Tech. So the next one will probably be in October at Coughlin, and I'm in charge of putting the program together. So we'll see how that goes. I'll let you know when that comes up. And that's it.
Any questions for Bill? All right, members report, Karen?
Just a couple of things. They weren't constituents, but they were citizens in Winnebago County who approached me about a homeless woman living in the parking lot of Aldi's in Neenah for about 5 months. So I called Renee and she said she knew about it, but call Neenah Police. And she says, so I did. The woman has actually been homeless for 10 years on Aldi's parking lot. She survived 10 years, I mean, including all winter long. So I guess she knows how to.
She knows about the shelters.
She knows about the shelters. She doesn't want to go to shelters. She has ways of coping. And so I reported back to my citizens, this is what I found out. And you can't force somebody to do something that's good for them. So, and then this, I don't know, this is probably off discipline somewhat. Because it's human, but it's not necessarily human services, but I think the sheriff was wanting some Bibles and Holy Scripture for I think this is how I heard of this from Connolly Hansen, and because he and I were working the fair. That's another discipline. Wanting Holy Scripture for the prisoners for the library card in the jail. So I've managed to get 18 Bibles. I'm still looking for Roman Bibles, Torahs, and Korans, but those will be delivered tomorrow afternoon when I finish a Parks meeting, another discipline, a Parks meeting, that'll be at Coughlin anyway, so I'm close enough. I don't think I can pull together the thing for tonight at the judiciary, but if I can't get them all boxed up, I can even deliver them tonight. That's all I have to report.
Right, Jill.
I can just comment on the homeless person in Aldi's, because every third Wednesday in January and every third Wednesday in July, we do a point in time count where we go and count all the homeless. And I know my supervisor found her just last week, so we're aware of her.
10 years.
She doesn't want our help.
Yeah.
That's what the police, that's what the
But
police.
you'll get a lot of that. I was really surprised when I talked to even the day by day warming in town here, and you see all those people at Walmart or whatever, corners or whatever. But the homeless shelter said, but we never see those people. We never see those people. So are those people even truly homeless, or I mean?
They're making a lot of money doing that.
Well, that could be, yeah, but like this
That
lady, she's scoped for 10 years,
A lot of money. I heard it's like
Yeah.
tens of thousands a month.
but like this lady's scoped for 10 years, I mean, she's
They start doing it.
used to it.
And we
you can't-
offer a ride, I mean,
Yeah.
so,
You're too well known.
You can't
never get
force
away
it
with
on
that.
her. Yeah.
I'll go to
that's all I have.
All right. Mark, you got anything to join? Since we,
Yeah, I just want to say that, being, as a staff and management for 36 years for Winnebago County, it's nice to be on the other side of the table and actually, you know, be part of that very well-informed board. And, it's an honor, and I'm looking forward to this. And, I think hopefully I can contribute something, and,
we'll go on.
I started out under Orrin King way back in the day, so yeah,
Get to go check it out now.
yeah, I know. So
Where's Human Services?
glad to be here, and it's a very well-informed board.
We're happy you're here, Mark.
Thank you.
Harold?
Yeah, I have a concern since the last meeting. I don't know where it's gonna go, but, you know, the county exec and the staff was gonna come with this drastic financial package change. And they were gonna get it done in like a year. I knew that wasn't gonna happen. What's bothering me now, I'm kind of sticking up for Janet, really. When we sat there, well, the executive's saying, boy, we got till next year. And people, they just want to say, okay, let's not even think about it till next year. I don't like that approach. I think you can't just sit here and do nothing. And then a year from now, all of a sudden, drop this all on Janet and say, now Janet, say, well, now you figure it out. So I would like to request that somehow management sits down and does some thinking, maybe try to get more information from the county exec. I know Bill says it changes, I understand that. But try to get some information, what do you think we're gonna have to do come next year? And then try to start brainstorming it. What are our options? What should we do? What are some of the problems we're gonna run into? Just don't set and put it on the back burner until next year. And then I'd like to have a report on this board sometime before the end of the year of what you have done about it.
Okay.
I think it's only fair to Janet.
Okay.
And, you know.
I think it's very fair. We can get your
If you have any more questions, just give me a call. I'm really concerned about it.
Just a response back if I can. I don't think that by him saying, talking about the county exec, that saying that we're gonna connect it to next year's budget, I don't think it means that he's gonna wait until right in the middle of next year's budget and then do something. I think it's gonna be, we're gonna probably finish up the third part of this in the fall. And then I guess it'll start to build the budget in the spring next year. But I'll give you a report on whether we finished our training, because the first part is to finish the training.
There's a quote that General Eisenhower said when he was planning for the Normandy invasion. He said, plans are worthless. Planning is everything. What he meant, they had a plan the invasion of France. They knew as soon as the soldiers landed, their things were going to change. But he said, planning is everything. That's what I'm saying. I'm using that as an example. We just can't sit back and do nothing until next year. Thank you.
Agreed.
But I am really concerned about it. I want somebody to keep on top of it.
Okay.
That it?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, oh. Ralph?
Well, you know, I always have a lot to say, but I took a month off, so I just catch back up on everything. It's interesting. It's interesting what you've said there. So I'll just have to look and see what I found out. So looks like everything's been going good. But, I had EAA for security for the hangars for 677,000 people. It was kind of cool. It was fun. I usually do the main gate the last 3 years, but they wanted me inside there. So it was very interesting. But
How many people attended?
377,000.
377,000.
the best ever, it's the record.
Six,
600, what did I
No,
say,
600, yeah.
677,000.
more than last year.
How many more?
27,000.
Really
Yeah.
good. Good crowd.
I can believe it trying to get
She was a
both
record.
in and out of Oshkosh.
Yeah.
No matter what exit you're trying to get on the highway, it was backed up.
Yeah.
The one thing that I did notice, I'll keep talking like that, but it was one, there was tons of people that have never been here before. I couldn't believe it because I talked to everyone, of course. They've never been here before. They brought kids and family. The second one was the pandemic theory. I thought, this is the third year. They stayed away for 2 years. And this year they decided to come. And the last one, everybody came to be with their friends. There was tons of people hanging out with their friends for this event. And I'll tell you, a lot of people, you know, I always talk about they have their little city. I never was asked by so many people, where should we go to eat? And they were there, they come in July 1st and they rent the camping grounds for a whole month, volunteers, and they were in our town. You know, a lot of times you think they stay in the city, they were out with it in Oshkosh a lot. So I think that was good, because a lot of people have the theory, they don't come out of this town, they stay in the city. They were out there doing a lot of, they were groups. There was an African group that went in a bus all over every night to a different restaurant. So they do get out, they do a lot, so I thought that was kind of impressive.
Good. All right. One thing I have is, I was out in Austin, Texas with Bill, and it was a very good, international convention. I serve on 2 standing committees, the Human Services and Education and the Healthy Counties Advisory Board. And Saturday, I got a letter that I was reappointed by the new president of NACO. The new president every year gets elected. So I got appointed back to those committees. Steve Binder got appointed to Healthy Counties along with me. And I think Brian definitely got, I know he got his Judiciary Committee back or whatever. They're long meetings. I mean, my Health and Human Services and Education, they run 9 o'clock in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. I mean, they're long meetings, but we learned a lot. Like you said, there was a lot of mental health, a lot of child welfare stuff, a lot of worker shortages. So, yes, yeah, that was a good thing, except it was hot. And that's it. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Anybody?
Date for next meeting?
Give me the,
Next meeting is Labor Day,
oh, that's right, it's late.
so it will be on Wednesday,
Wednesday.
September 6th, and that will be in Neenah.
September 6th in Neenah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Then I will move to adjourn, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, the motion was made. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thanks for coming. It's non-debatable. Adjournment is non-debatable.
Son of a gun.
Yeah, there you know discussion on it.